Hi everyone, this is Debbie from Project 39 Mini Albums, and this is a design team project for Country Craft Creations. This is the tutorial on how I made the bee house folio. There is a walkthrough. If you'd like to see that, check the link in the description box below. Alright, let's get started. Alright, to make the cover, we're going to take the 8.5 by 11 sheet, and with the 11-inch part at the top, we're going to score at 1 inch and at 2 inch. And then we're going to go over to the other side and score at 9 and 10. And then we're going to grab a bone folder and burnish those folds. And then I'm going to grab the next papers, which are 6 3/4 by 8.5, and I'm going to glue that onto here. I'm going to turn this upside down and grab my art glitter glue. And utilizing the lines on my mat, I'm going to use that to line up the papers. So I'll put them down, make sure that's lined up, and burnish. All right, and I'm going to flip that over and do the same with the next one. So I'll line that up. I'm using that blue line at the top. And that's the good thing about the art glitter glue. Sometimes they use score tape, but the art glitter glue gives you a little bit of wiggle room, and so that just gives you a little bit of time. Okay, so now we have the cover of the album. Now it doesn't go, it gives you a little bit of a gap so you see the paper below it. All right, now for the inside left cover, we're going to cut two pieces, 4 1/4 by 6 3/4. So I've already got them cut 4 1/4 by 6 3/4. So I'm going to put the long side to the top and score at 1/2 inch on both of those. I'm going to grab my scissors and just miter the corners a little bit. And then I'll burnish on the fold. And this is real simple. I'm going to take my glue and add one at the top. I'm going to go in about 1/4 inch and one at the top. think I need to clean off the tip of my glue. It's getting a little gumpy. Now don't forget, the page ends at that that score line, so I'm going to go 1/4 inch over from that score line and put one on the bottom. And make sure it's lined up well with the bottom of the paper. So there we go, there's that. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and put a magnet in. Eventually there's going to be a magnet there. All right, I'm just going to grab a pencil and just write magnet so I don't forget. And I'll put a circle here so I don't forget. All right, so now on the inside right cover, we're going to cut one at 8.5 by 5 1/4 and one at 8.5 by 5 1/2. Eight and a half by 5 1/4, 8.5 by 5 1/2. What we're making is this flap. So there is about 1/4 inch showing to allow room for that waterfall to expand. The long side at 1/2 and 3/4. 1/2 and 3/4. This one, 1/2, oops, and 3/4. So now I'm going to fold and burnish. And I'm going to miter the corners. So just miter on that 1/2 inch. Don't do anything on that, the extra 1/4 inch. Do the same with this one. So I'm going to put the larger of the two on the left side. So the 8.5 inch one's going to go on the left side. So I'm going to take, oops, I did not miter this one. I'll put that down and burnish it real well, and then add some glue to this side. And put that, this one, and put that right on the edge. And burnish that as well. Okay, so now this is going to have a waterfall inside. So let's go ahead and make that waterfall. You're going to need one piece 6.5 by 8.5, and you're going to need 8 pieces 6.5 by 5. That, of course, is for the waterfall. So you're going to need a base piece. Now you could add it to the base of the base of the cover, but to me it's easier to make a waterfall separately so I can take my time and line it up really good, and then add it to there. If you wanted to as well, when you add it, you can just put tape on the 3 sides, the 2 sides in the bottom, and use this as a pocket at the top. I chose not to do that just because I don't want anything going above my mini album or my folio, but that is an option if you want to. So 6.5 by 8.5, and then 8 of them 6.5 by 5. And these we're going to score all at 1/2 inch. With the short side at the top, we're going to score on the long side. Now with waterfalls, you want to make sure that you get these pieces straight as possible. A lot of people have problems making waterfalls. They sometimes are not straight. Well, the important thing is when you put down the pattern paper, you keep that all straight and level. But again, it's important to take your time and put it as straight as you can. And I'll show you another trick. Let me just finish scoring these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. If you sometimes find that your waterfalls are a little wonky, what I do is I very lightly make score lines every 1/2 inch. So there's 8. Now, this is not going to line up perfectly because even though we're making 1/2 inch scores, by the time you folded this, it actually is a little bit less than 1/2 inch. A smidgen, probably 1/64 of an inch, less than 1/2 inch. But you'll put a 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. By the time you get to the bottom, it's going to be off by maybe a 1/8 of an inch, maybe. But at least it helps you line them up straight across. And I'll show you as we get going. Take these, the 6.5 by 5 pieces that are scored, and go ahead and fold on the score line, and let's just pile them up. Fold and burnish. Now you're not going to miter corners of a waterfall. You want them straight. So I will continue burnishing these. And some people cover the waterfalls. Actually, sometimes I do cover the waterfalls with design paper or even plain paper. It really all depends on how much room I have and how much paper I have. If my mini album has a lot of room for expansion, then I might cover them. If there's no room for expansion, then I'm not going to cover the waterfalls. Okay, I'm going to grab some glue. I'm not going to use too much. But again, using the glue gives you room to move it. So I'm lining it up at the top because I know that was square, but the bottom was not, so I pulled it off to do it again. I should start at this corner, make sure it's straight here and straight on that side. So that is, and I'm happy. The first one is always important, to start the first one nice and straight. Okay, we'll do it again. So you can see I still have score lines there. Again, just to help me judge where, if I'm staying straight with mine. So I want to butt it up right to the bottom of that last waterfall and all the way over to the side. And we'll continue. You could use score tape if you wanted to. All right, I promise I'll clean this off. All right, again, I'll butt it up. Let me turn the light on. And line it up to the side. Line it up to there. Good, nice and straight. It's looking fabulous. All right, line it to the side. Make sure it's there. And burnish it down. So now you'll see I'm still straight on these lines, but I'm starting to be a little off on them. They're still a hairline away from there, but it just helps line things up. You know, if one starts getting wonky, then you know you need to pay attention to where the lines are. All right, I'm lining it up here and there. So I have an extra glue. Use an old, not an old, a baby wipe that's been, I just wash them and let them air dry. It takes off some of the lint. All right, we're doing fabulous. Line it up, line it up. Two more. And here's the last one. Lining it up the top and the side. Using my bone folder to burnish. Burnish it on the back. And so when I've noticed that the last one is a little bit more than ½ an inch. You could just leave it because it's 8½ and it'll fit on the page 8½, but it bothers me, so I'm going to just trim it. Do you see? So I'm just going to put it in the paper trimmer and trim a little bit off. You don't have to if you don't want to. So I just took off not even 1/4 of an inch, and that looks better to me. Alrighty, for the closure, you have to determine what size cut apart you're going to use, but I'm going to use a 3 by 5.5 inch one. So, you know, it depends on what you're going to put up here. If you have a busy pattern up here, you don't want to cover it halfway, but you want room for a magnet. So I'm going to allow about 1 inch of this to show. So that means that here, if this flap is going to be up 1 inch, then this is the line that's I'm going to need to start scoring at. So I'll put that right there. So I'll score here, which is 4 7/8, and then I'll score at 5. So again, it allows room for expansion for the waterfall. You could even make it a little bigger. That's just a very small channel. And then I'm going to put that down here. Make sure it's centered. Add some glue. And again, make sure that's centered. And it's closed. And that's good. That's the back of it. And there's that. So this is going to go in our folio on the right side, and it's just going to be centered between those score lines. And again, if you wanted to make a pocket here, just put some glue or tape on 2 sides and the bottom. I am not, so I'm going to cover the whole thing with the glue. And again, center it. And there we go. So I'm going to open the bottom one. In each page. And there we go. So there's your waterfall, and don't forget you're going to put a magnet here and one on here. So there's that. And then for this closure, this you could, whatever your element's going to be. So if you're going to have, like on the B paper, I cut this out and then backed it on the yellow and then backed it on the black. And this was the hive was about 5.5 by 2 3/4. So just get consecutively larger, and then you'll put the magnets on the black, and then I put the yellow on top to hide the magnets once I made that. So there's that. All right, so now we're going to start working on the pages inside. So they get, when I start at the bottom, so first of all, this flap and the pocket go on last. I'm going to start with consecutively smaller margins under here. I'll show you what I mean. Let's start with 2 sheets at 8.5 by 8.5. Score at 1 and 1.5. 1 and 1.5. It's 8.5 by 8.5, so I didn't have to worry about what side was to the top. I'm going to go ahead and score the rest of these as well. The next size is 8 by 8.5. So the 8-inch side is at the top. You're going to score at, on the 8.5-inch side, you're going to score at 3/4 and 1 1/8. So basically there's 3/8 of an inch there. So the 8-inch side is at the top, 8.5-inch side is at the side. You're going to score at 3/4 and 1 1/8. All right, I'm going to put those aside, and the next one is, you're going to need 2 of these, 7 1/4 by 8.5. 7 1/4 by 8.5. The 7 1/4 inch side is at the top. 8.5-inch side is on the side. You're going to score at 1/2 inch and 5/8. Was that right? Huh? I would have thought I would have done 1/4, but that's what it says. Yep, that's it. And 5/8. No, that's not, because this is going to go over the layer with the pocket and the flap. 1/2 and 5/8. Alrighty. I'm going to take these and turn them upside down so they're in the right order. Open up my folio and get to the center. And we'll burnish and fold as we go. So we'll burnish and fold the 8.5 by 8.5 one. And then the other 8.5 by 8.5 one. All right, you could miter the corners, but I'm not going to here, just because it'll help me determine if I'm staying straight. So that's going to go, one's going to go on the left side, one's going to go on the right side. And you want to come in just a smidgen on this side of the score. Here, smidgen on this side of the score. Looking for my baby wipe. Well, let me burnish, and then I'm going to cover that. Okay, so let's do the same with this. So a smidgen on this side of the score line. And of course make sure that it's even with the bottom or the top, or both. All right, so I have an inch showing here. Now the next one will fold and burnish as well. And again, we're going to stay on this side of the score line. And make sure you've got it even top and bottom. And do that with the next one as well. We're putting the glue on the larger part of the flap here. And here's the score line. I'm going to stay just a smidgen to the left of it. All right, now we'll do the last one. Tough to fold because there's just a 1/8 of an inch there, but it's important to burnish it. All right, now I'll stay to the right of the score line here. And same with this one. Burnish it, fold it, add the glue. Okay, and now you can see that there are almost steps here. So if I did all with a 1/2 inch overlap, it's going to end abruptly at 1/2 inch. You're going to have 3 widths of the paper at 1/2 inch. So I did more like a stair stepping. So it's not as abrupt. Alrighty. So the way it's going to go is that'll go, and then this one, and that, and this, and that, and that. And if you wanted to, you could do without one of these layers. If you wanted to have more chunky embellishments, then you certainly could take one of these layers off. There's this one that has a side pocket. This one has just plain paper. You could take that one off if you wanted to. Here's the other side pocket. This has a waterfall. If you don't want to do that waterfall, if you don't have very many portrait pictures, you can take that off. So anyhow, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so this pocket is 7.5 by 4 3/4. I'm just sizing it just to see if that's going to work. And it should. So you're going to score this on 3 sides, the one long side and the 2 short sides. And the reason I was saying is it going to work is because just want to make sure that it will fit in with the layers. It will. So so score at 1/2 inch and score at 7. Really, you're scoring at 1/2 inch on 3 sides. For this one, we're definitely going to miter the corners. Miter that top one this one, and here. And there's also a long flap. This is 6.5 by 8.5. We're going to put the long side at the top and score it 1/2 inch. Now, I like my pocket flaps to have a rounded corner on the bottom. I don't know. I just do. So now that we have that, we'll move our scoreboard aside, and we're going to fold and burnish the pocket. Fold all three and burnish all three to the inside or towards you. And I will just add a little bit of glue. And center it on the page. I'm making sure it's all the way down to the bottom and it's centered. Oops. That is beautiful. And then we've got the pocket flap. I will fold and burnish and miter. I'm going to turn this to make it easier to work on. Add my glue. And this will go to the top. Now you can adjust the size of this pocket if you wanted to. When I added the pocket, I added a big flap because that way, if you have cut aparts or anything here, the flap helps so it doesn't impinge on the cut aparts. For instance, if you had a flap that was here and you had it cut apart the same height here, it might get hung up on there. So I just decided a long flap would be nicer here. And then with mine, so this has one library style closure and another one here. I wouldn't do that. I would just put a magnet on here. It'll keep it flat and it's easier than this. I worry that the elastic might come up. So I would just do a magnet. So again, I'm going to make a note to myself here and just do a circle here and write magnet. It's in pencil, but you can still see it. Of course, that was white chalk, and I'll do a circle at the top so I remember that as well. All right, so that's done. And then we're going to fold this one in, and this is going to have the waterfall. Sorry, I keep opening and closing it, but so this one on one side has just a plain piece of paper, and I use this B paper with that, knowing that you can cover it because we already have that somewhere else. And then there's a waterfall that's a portrait waterfall and is put on 3 sides, so there is room for a little side loading pocket. So let's make the waterfall. All right, so for the waterfall, you're going to need the base, which is 4.5 by 8.5, And then you're going to need the waterfalls. You'll need 4 of them at 7 by 4.5. Put aside the base, grab your scoreboard, and we're going to score each of these on the short side. So the 7-inch side is on the top. You're going to score it 1/2 inch. And just like we did before, you're not going to miter the corners, but you're going to fold and burnish each of these. So again, the good thing about this is, and I'm turning this upside down, you're going to have room for portrait and landscape photos in a waterfall. So I turn that on its side just so I can see. Again, don't miter the corners. And we're going to add the first one to the top. I'm going to make sure it is even with the edge of the top and even with the edge, the side and the bottom in this case, because I turned it to the side. And then open that up and do the next one. So we'll put that one right next to the first one. And burnish. Okay. Next one as well. And I will go ahead and erase this at some point, just because I probably won't cover this. And one more. Okay, and just like the other one, I'm going to trim a smidgen off the bottom of this, just because it doesn't look, because it bothers me. There we go. All right, so there's that waterfall. Now in this case, I have a piece cut 2 by 3 3/4. And I'm gonna score at 1/2 and 5/8. 1/2 and 5/8. Gonna fold and burnish. Add my glue to the inside. And I will center this. So the other score line shows you're going to center it just, if I do it this way, just to the left of the score line. The first score line, the second one will show, and then that's all we have to do there. And don't forget to put a mark for a magnet, one there and one there. Now this is going to go in the book on the left side of that first page. So add some glue, sort of in a U shape. I'm not going to go all the way to the top because I want to slip in the paper that's going to cover this page. I'll show you in a second. So here, when I put the pattern paper down here, I'll tuck it in a little bit. The pattern paper does not have to cover that whole piece because you won't see it, but it is probably about 1/2 inch more than what you see. So I just left that open a little bit. You can close it when you put the pattern paper in. And this piece, you notice mine is a little smaller. You can make it as big or as small as whatever paper you're going to put on top of that. All right, so now we're going to do the side loading pockets. So this will close like this, and then you have 2 side loading pockets facing each other. So you see here, I've got a photo mat in there. That's a good size photo mat too. So let's do the side loading pockets. We're going to do 2 of those. You're going to cut 2 sheets at 9.5 by 4 1/4. 9.5 by 4 1/4. And so the pockets that we're going to score on 3 sides. You're going to score on 1 long side and 2 short sides. So you score at 1/2 inch and then at 9. 1/2 inch and again at 9. And then the 1 long side. Now these we need to miter. So go ahead and miter the corners where those 2 pieces meet. And let's fold and burnish. We'll do both at the same time. All right, so now we've got this. We just put the waterfall on. We're going to take this one page on the right side and close that. And we're going to put just photo mats on this side, but we're going to put our loaded pockets now on the right side and the left side. The reason I wanted this closed is because I don't want anything fussy to get in the way of the waterfall. All right, so we will go ahead and add some glue. And I will close this. Put that there. And then on the left side, do the same thing. But of course, I wanted this one facing the opposite way. The one on the right side, the opening faces right. The one here on the left side, the opening will face left. Now make sure you do it on the left side of the score line. And don't put it right on the score line, but just have it a smidgen, not even a 1/16 of an inch, 1/32 of an inch to the left of the score line. All right, so now we have that. Okay, so here we need two pieces, 6 3/8 by 4 3/4. 6 3/8 by 4 3/4. We're going to score each on the long side. So I'll put the short side at the top, score 1/2 inch on the long side for each of those. Go ahead and miter the corners and then fold and burnish. Fold and burnish. And so on the center here, we've got the side loading pockets, and then the center, which is the one we used to cover the waterfall, we're going to add one to the bottom. Just center it on that page, and then one to the top. And again, just center it on that page. And the kind of closure we're going to use is it's going to have a removable cut apart. And it can be as, you know, if you have a 3x4 cut apart, you could use that. If you have a 4x3 cut apart, you could use that. You could use a circle, but you're going to add a magnet to the top and the bottom, and I'll show you what I mean. So that is this piece. So there's a magnet on the top and the bottom, and a magnet here and here, and that opens like that to show you this. So we're not going to cut that. It depends on what paper you'll have left in your collection. Okay. Now we need pockets. We're going to do this page next. This one. So this one has pockets going to the left. And then close this one, and we have pockets going to the right. So you're going to need 4 pockets, and the measurements of that are 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. So 4 of those. And we're going to score each of those on 3 sides. So score at 1/2 and 4 3/4. Rotate and score at 1/2. Oops, 1/2, 4 3/4. Rotate, score. And miter all of these. So when I miter the corners, so we'll miter the top, and that's all right, it doesn't have to be a huge miter. But when I miter the corners where there's the X, I don't go straight across. I tend to go a little more than straight across. And I'll show you why. So I'll go straight across here. And then I'm going to fold and burnish. So we'll fold here. So the one where I went straight across, I don't know if you can see it, but it overlaps. And so that adds some unnecessary bulk. The one I've made more than a straight line across doesn't overlap. So I like to do it that way because then, I mean, again, as I've said, it's not a big deal for one or two, but anywhere you can save a little bit of bulk to your mini albums or folios, the more photos you can add. And since it should be all about adding photos, if I can trim corners differently, then that is what I'll do. Okay, now we have all 4 of these. Put that aside. We're going to fold and burnish on all those 3 score lines. And you could do different things to the flaps. You're going to have flaps coming out of the pockets. So on my album, I just rounded the corners. You could use a tab punch if you wanted to. If you have a different kind of tab pull, you could use that. If you wanted to, you could use one of those circle punches and make this a little round, or you could use your envelope punch board or tab board and make it a little indentation so you can pull. That is entirely up to you how you want to do that, but there's a couple of different options. And you also, if you had a paper edger, a decorative edge punch, you could use that here as well. Okay, so now again we've got, well, let's show you on my prototype. So here's our side loading pockets. We'll close those, and now this pocket is open on the left side. Close that, and the pocket is open on the right. So here's my side loading pockets. We'll close this one. And we'll add some glue there, and I'll put it at the top. And I've got the edge at the top and the edge just about on the side there, just about. And then I'll glue that down. And I'll put this one butt up right next to that one. And there we go. So now we've got the pockets. We'll do that, so close this one with the side loading pocket and do the same for the next one. You guys hanging in there with me? We're really almost done. I mean, after this you get to do the decorating. And I usually don't do decorating videos because everybody has their own way of decorating, and that's the fun of it. The only thing I'll tell you is some people will use a 1/4 of an inch border all around. I probably use a little bit less. I probably use 3/8 of an inch. So if I was going to mat a square onto a square, I'd have the smaller piece, 3/8 of an inch, entirely smaller on the 2 sides. So then there's a smaller border around it. I don't, a 1/4 inch to me is too big, but you know, that's entirely up to you. Some people really like those big borders. So whatever you like. All right, so we've got that done. We're doing great. All right, so we have, these are done now. Now, so these pieces, just to add a little interest, I mean, I could have put, filled it with a whole sheet of decorative paper. But instead of doing that on some of them that you saw, I just flipped through one. I just cut out a, this is for a 5x7 photo. Let me move it a little closer. This is for a 5x7 photo. So I cut out a piece of cardstock 5 1/4 by 7 1/4. And that way, if you put a 5x7, there's still a small border around it. And then I took some of my scraps and just paper pieced it so it would fit in that page. And then I cut some fussy cut elements and added it to the side. And again, those fussy cut elements are open. So if you put a photo there, it would be on the edge of the photo, but it wouldn't really cover much of it. All right, so this will close. So nothing we need to cut for that. It's just how you mat it. So now this page has pieces that open up on the side, so you can add some landscape photos. You can add 4 landscape photos on that page. So to do that, you need 2 6 3/4 by 4 1/4. 6 3/4 by 4 1/4. And we're just going to score that on one short side. And let's go ahead and measure the corner. Fold it and burnish, fold and burnish. Now, which one is this? This one is this piece. So we've got the flap. We're going to close the left side, close the right side, and these are going to go on this piece that we have showing. So I'm going to add glue to the score and put it on the left side and make sure the bottom is lined up as well, and do the same to this. And this piece, you could, this piece I use swivel tabs on. So before I put the decorative paper here on the side, let me show you with this one. I had swivel tab, I have a die that will make those. So I cut it with the yellow cardstock on top of the die, on top of chipboard, and then put it on with a brad on this paper and then glued that paper down. I actually added tape so it was be really strong. If you don't want to use a swivel tab, you could use magnets in there, and that would work just as well. And the last thing I wanted to show you was the mats. So there are two sizes of mats. There are the 4x6 mats, which went in these side loading pockets, and as well there was one that I put in here. This one I didn't round the corners on, but these ones I rounded the corners on, and the side loading pockets had the larger one. So the black cardstock is 6x8. I rounded the corners. The yellow cardstock is 5 3/4 by 7 3/4. This is 6x8. I rounded the corners, and the yellow cardstock is 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. All right, and that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much. So I'm going to close that. And that is it. The only thing you have to do now, close that one, is decorate. So again, you can see my really small borders on here. So let me go through one more time and show you how I decorated and give you any extra hints. All right, we already talked about the cover. So again, don't forget to put magnets on this. And I just put a piece of paper. It's just copy paper that I put a border on and printed it in gray tone. I really put the border on just so I could see where to cut it. And it says place 4x6 photo there. So that comes off. This is a fussy cut piece from the collection. And this is one of the back, like the B sides of the paper. It's more muted. So that closes and then that closes. This is fussy cut and it's just glued down on two sides. It's open, so you could put a nice photo there. You could put 2 4x6s or 1 5x7, either one. I also did put decorative paper here. So here I explained the swivel tab, so I'm not going to go over that. This side, of course, I cut this image, I think I told you before, but it's about 2 3/4 by 5 1/2. Put it on yellow, put it on black, and then I put the magnet on, then put yellow on this side. When I cut this paper, I cut it. The reason this is bigger than this is because, where else did I have that paper? I don't know. I know it was somewhere else. But there was a border here around it, and it just made such a nice fussy cut image. So I tried to stay as close to the border as I could. And usually you wouldn't put a photo on here, but you could. There's nothing to say you can't. But here I just wanted to put something just so it would look consistent and pretty. So when I cut, I started at the bottom and I cut 1/2 inch strips all the way up, made sure I kept them in order, and then started at the bottom and then lined them all up as I go. This was just a scrap piece of paper. Okay, there's that. I talked to you about how to put this on. That's just a plain piece from the collection. I talked to you about how to do that. Again, fussy cutting some elements to put on there. That's 4x6. The black is 4x6, so the smaller one is 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. And see, it's a little snug, but it goes in. You can make it smaller if you wanted to. That opens like that. We talked about that. That's the same as the last one. I love this image, so I wanted to make sure that it had prime showing. And then this is just scraps. And then again, I talked in the walkthrough about how I put those in there. That's just a scrap piece. And I cut the paper again in layers so it's all consistent. And this actually is the same as this. It's just, that's the top of the page. That's the top of another page. I turned it upside down. But that looks nice together, doesn't it? And I think I have to glue that. I don't think that one's been glued. And then that's, again, I glued the waterfall on 3 sides. That's a whole page. That was the back of this page, but that's got the back of it is muted, which seems to coincide with the roses here. So I just thought that looked nice. And that is it. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put it in the comments. You definitely need to get a hold of this bee house paper from Country Craft Creations. It can only be purchased there. You cannot get it at scrapbook.com or anywhere else. It is beautiful to work with. It cuts nice, edges nice. And when I was putting the flowers in, it die cuts perfectly. Sorry, this guy fell off though. It die cut perfectly. And show you a little close-up of all this. So these are fussy cut flowers. And the bees are, come on paper, focus. The bees are fussy cut and they are put on acetate, but they're flying around. So that is what I have for you today. Again, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification, and thanks so much for watching. Have a fabulous day.